And that's a little bit of a struggling match to get these. If you were to take the sway bar end link off like they tell you in the instructions, this arm would be easier to move. What's up guys, my name is Andy. In this video, I'm gonna be installing some QA1 coilovers on the front of my 66 Mustang. Those coilovers are in this box, which just showed up. And I figured we'd do a real quick unboxing just to see everything that we got in here before we get started. I have a packing invoice. Oh, hey, look at this guys. So this is one of those banners, much like I've got up there for quick performance. We've got a banner for QA1. Oh man, this is great. I don't know where I'm gonna put this thing. I'm gonna have to find a place for it. Okay, another thing we got in here, this is the spanner wrenches and the thrust kit, which we'll go over here in a minute for these coilovers, so don't lose that. A t-shirt. Now, I always like getting this stuff. This is fantastic. Can always use another shirt. What's really cool about this, so I called up QA1, I called them up to order some shocks for my car and get to talk to them and asked them if they would work with me on this. Full disclosure, I did get a little bit of a discount on these coilovers, but I did pay for them, and I would have paid full price anyways. When I'm searching for parts for my car, I search out for specific parts. There's performance related, there's some feature about that part, and with these, I wanted something that was gonna do what I need to do. As I continue to modify this car and dial it in for the kind of driving I wanna do, I wanted something that's going to, take care of all those parts of, of this build as I move forward. And after talking to those guys at QA1, man, the customer service is top shelf. That's another reason why I went with these guys. They're going to be able to help me out with any questions that I have down the road. If I ever have to service these parts, I can send them back and get them serviced. I mean, that's a big deal to me, particularly as I dial this car in and I kind of take it where I want to go. Having that ability to fall back on them to get anything fixed is fantastic. I don't get that with a lot of other companies, so I like that part. So, yay, shirt. Okay, we got, I'm guessing these are the two springs. I went with the 350-pound springs, which we'll cover that a little bit here a bit more. And then these are gonna be, yeah, all right, look at this. So this is the coilover setup. Instructions, we're gonna need that. So this is great. This is exactly what I was looking for. This is a double adjustable, the compression and rebound is something that I wanted to be able to dial in. With the shocks that I have now, they're set in by the factory and you can't do anything about it. And I want to be able to take a little more control of the car and dial it in the way I'd like. So we'll cover those settings here in a bit. This is the other one. So we've got both of the shock bodies, springs, instructions, spanner wrench, and thrust bearing kit, shirt. And I think we're set to go. Let's go ahead and take these out of the package and get them set up on the bench, and then we can take apart the car. All right, now that we got everything unboxed, let's take a look at what we have here. These are the 350-pound springs. There are three options, 354 and 450. And what's great about QA1 is you can call them and tell them what your application is, and they can recommend the spring for you based on how you want to drive the car, what you want to do with it. So this is what we came up with, which is great. I can always go up if I need to. Then we've got these shock tower caps. We will reuse the hardware that's in the car, but we're going to use these instead of the ones that are in the car, so that's great that they include those. Then you've got the spring perches, and there's two pieces here. There's the locking ring, and then there's the ring that the spring sits on, and we'll put these on here. In the instructions, they explain how the order in which you install these. This one goes first with this there's a little bit of a lip here. This goes up, and then you put this one on top of that. And then there's one included thrust washer here. However, what you can do is order their thrust bearing kit. And in fact, if you get this part number right here, you'll get both the bearings instead of just this piece here. And then you get the spanner wrenches. And what's great about these is it's got a 3/8 attachment here, so you can get a socket wrench on there and get inside kind of those tight areas. The kinds that come with the handle on them that you can't always get every position. So this allows you to be a little more versatile with adjusting the, where you're going to set these spring perches when you're done. So yeah, we got that kit, and then this is the hardware that you're going to get. You're going to get the bolt for the top of the spring shock tower piece, and then the two bolts. They're going to bolt this bottom piece into the upper control arm, and we'll show you that when we get there. And then of course, you got the the shock body itself. And these adjustments here, we can, what's really cool, you can hear there's an audible click and you can actually feel it. So when you're adjusting these, you don't have to guess, where you're at. And there's a total of 18 adjustments for the compression and for the rebound each. And so you can dial that into exactly what you want. In fact, one of the really cool things I like about the instructions here from QA1 is they give you kind of a base setting, whether you're going to be doing drag racing or other applications, if you want nice ride or a firm ride, a place to start. Now, obviously, you're going to dial it into what you want, but you don't have to guess, okay, do I start at 1 click? Do I start at 10 clicks? Where do I start? And I'm going to be doing something probably a more firm ride, improved handling. So I'm going to probably start at 8 clicks on both of them. And then from there I can adjust and see where I want to go. But I like that they give you this information so you're not guessing on where to start and what it means. So I like that. So I think from here, what I need to do is I need to go ahead and we need to put this piece on here, get it threaded on there. We need to put some Permatex anti-seize on these rings before we put them on there and get them ready to go. So we'll get that set up. And then you will use the top, that rubber soft mount piece that goes on the top of your spring in your car. You're gonna need to put that on here. When we take the springs out of the car, we'll grab that and put it on here and then get everything all set up and go from there. So, all right, let's go ahead and start taking the car apart. Before we get the car lifted up and put on jack stands to take this apart, the instructions say to measure from the ground to the top of the fender to see what the current height is. And on the other side, I got 24¼ and over here I'm about 24 3/8. So that's one of the nice things about the coilover system is I'll be able to even out the gap, the wheel gap on either side, but at least that we know what our starting point is. Once you get the car up on jack stands, we're going to want to do one more safety thing, and that's going to be putting the floor jack underneath the lower control arm. The reason why is when we take the nuts off of the bottom of the shock, this whole system is going to want to move downward because of the load on the spring. So if we just put the floor jack underneath there and just pump it up just a little bit, just lift it up just a little bit, it takes that load off of there, we can remove that, and this thing's not going to shoot down on us. So now we're going to want to go up top, and we're going to want to take these 3 nuts off of the shock cap. We can pull that and get that all loose, and then come back down here and take those nuts off the bottom of the shock and pull the shock out. Now when you pull this shock out, there's a rubber bushing that just fell down on the ground, but there's also one in the back that's stuck on the thread. So when you pull this out, just be mindful that you don't lose those somewhere because you may need them down the road for something else. Here's those rubber bushings that fall out from underneath there when you pull the shock. Okay, so this is where my car is going to probably differ a little from yours. Because I've got lowering springs and because I cut the spring so it's actually even lower, when I remove the jack, this spring is almost going to fall out. Now on your car, if you're doing with a stock setup and you're going from stock to these coilovers, you're going to have the original spring in there and there's going to be a lot of tension on there. You're going to have to use a spring compressor. There's several different styles. And this is just one style that you can get. I actually purchased this because I had done this a couple times on my car, but this is the part number 27035. This is from OEM Tools, and this is one style. This goes on the bottom, in here, and then you take this part and you feed it through the top, and you can run, like an impact wrench or something on this, and it compresses the spring. There's other styles out there you can get too, but because the way mine's set up, once I remove this floor jack, this thing's going to just come down. I'll just be able to pull the spring out of there. So guys, again, that's not going to be that easy on your car. You're going to want to use a spring compressor, but this is what I'm dealing with, so this works. So remember I was saying earlier we need this rubber pad thing off the top of the coil. We're going to put this on the top of the springs for our coilovers, and we're going to go ahead and set this spring aside. The whole shock system, that shock cap, everything, we'll just set that aside. There's no reason to throw it away, but we're not going to need any of that stuff other than the mounting hardware for the new setup. So the last thing we need to do is we need to take the spring perch out, and there's just a bolt and a nut underneath each side of the upper control arm here. Take that off, and we'll get ready for the coilovers. Now these bolts underneath here on the spring perches, particularly the nut, I had to spray a little WD-40 underneath there because these things I don't think they've ever been removed. Now we can install the shock cap, or in this case, the coilover cap. And what's great about these is they're symmetrical. It doesn't matter which side of the car you put these on. But we are going to reuse the hardware that's on here. So we'll just go ahead and set that on top of that. We'll put the nuts back on and we'll torque these things down. And because these carriage nuts are just sitting in a slot underneath in the shock tower here, sometimes they fall down a little bit. So what I like about this design is I can reach in here and kind of hold the bottom of it with my finger, whereas the other shock cap is more enclosed and it's harder to get underneath there. So I do like that. I did find that I had to grind off the corner of this, and the reason why is the way that my export brace is shaped. There's kind of a cupped edge along here, and these brackets, as beefy as they are, and that's awesome, I'm finding that it was getting in the way with this thing. Now, that may not be a problem for you, depending on what reproduction export brace you have. You may not have that spot, but I don't recommend doing this. This is at your own risk, right? This will still work for what I need, but to get this thing to fit on there, I guess another option would be to get longer carriage bolts, but it's still, the corner of it was binding on my export brace. So, all right, now I think we can finish installing it. Yeah, I recommend longer carriage bolts for here. This is working, but probably safer to do that. And then once you get these torqued down to 26 foot-pounds, we can go ahead and move over and assemble the coilovers. And before we put this spring on the coilover shock body, let's get that rubber boot thing mounted on here like we were talking about before. And then we can place it on the shock body. Like so. And then we're going to mount this bottom T-section to the upper control arm. And we're going to use the supplied hardware that the QA1 gives you. And then you're going to obviously want the knobs facing out front so that we can adjust that when we need to. And that's a little bit of a struggling match to get these. If you were to take the sway bar end link off like they tell you in the instructions, this arm would be easier to move. All right, we're going to come back and torque these, but first let's go ahead and drive the top of the coilover shock up into the shock cap. Now to drive the top of the shock up inside the cap here, we'll do the same thing we did before. We put the floor jack underneath the lower control arm and we'll just jack it up and it'll slowly drive this up inside here. Then we'll put this bolt through. When we get it through, get it done, we want to torque it to 50 foot-pounds. And this is where if you had an extra set of hands, it's really helpful. Somebody can run the floor jack, the other person guides this up inside here. it's actually lifting the car because this is so stiff. Again, doing that sway bar probably would have helped. So all right guys, once you're done up top, remember 50 pounds on that big bolt up top, then 26 pounds around the shock cap, and 37 pounds of torque on these two bolts here. If I had to make a complaint or make a suggestion, it'd be nice to see a washer underneath the bolt, as the slot that these fit in the head of the bolt, there's not a lot of shoulder space left there, although this is all in compression, so it's probably not an issue anyways. But anyways, so we're gonna wanna leave these settings here on 0, and from there you're going to want to, actually you want to do that before you install the shock, which you probably already did. And we're going to adjust these up to 8 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for the compression, 8 for the rebound. And that's where I'm going to start from. Again, you guys may choose to go softer or more firmer settings on yours, whatever you want to do there. So what I can do is I can go ahead and install the wheel back on this side and get the other side done. All right, we went ahead and got the other side installed. I did want to point out that it's easier to do when you don't have to mess around with the camera. It goes much faster, especially since you know what you're doing when you did the first side. The second side's always easier. Also, it's easier if you follow the instructions and and loosen the sway bar bolt. I should have done that to begin with, and there's a reason why they put that in the instructions. So just loosen that up. It allows the control arms to drop farther, allows you to get this system installed a little easier, and you don't have to struggle with it as much. So anyway, just a heads up on that. So now the next step is to go ahead and put the tires back on the car. We're going to lower it on the ground, and we're going to see where we come out. I expect this car to be really low because we're on the lowest setting on those coilovers. So let's go ahead and do that, see where we're at, then we'll jack the car back up and we can spin that spring perch and kind of raise the car and figure out where we want to be. All right guys, what are your predictions? Remember we were 24 3/8 on this side. And I remember my car was already lowered with those lowering springs that I had. So I'm willing to bet that this is going to be so low that I'm not going to be able to get the jack out from underneath the car. So we'll find out here. Let's see what happens. Okay, now it's not lower because the tire's not tucked up inside. But when you do this, you kind of load up the suspension a little bit. So what we need to do is push the car out of the garage and roll it back in and let the suspension kind of settle, because right now it's the way that the tire is set up, it's actually binding on it, and the tire wants to scoot outwards, the bottom of it does, so that it can continue to settle. So let me roll it real quick and then we'll see where we ended up. All right, guys, that is low. Woohoo! It's tucked up inside there. All right, so I don't know if we have any more to go, so we'll see what we end up with. So it's going to be hard to see, but we're right between 23 3/8 and 23 1/2. So I came down another inch on this side. Let me do the other side real quick. Yeah, it's about a 23 1/4 on the other side. So we came down about an inch, and that's actually a little bit more than I want, partly because these fenders are not perfectly rolled, and I can, as I put my finger here, I'm hitting the fender lip, and I know it's gonna rub on that. So I do want to come up a little bit. So the trick is to jack the car back up, and I was looking at when I put the tire on, you should be able to put those spanner wrenches on there and adjust that spring perch without having to take the tire off. So let's do that real quick. You guys, this car is so low, I can't even get the jack. The body of this thing can't even get up the front lip on the car. So I gotta come from the side over here, and we're just gonna do this side first and measure it out. All right, so I went ahead and raised that up a 1/2 inch, spring perch up a 1/2 inch. I did notice that this was actually lower too. When I was getting everything else set up here, I remeasured right before I lifted the car, and I had gone down to almost 23 inches. So we've come down, I don't know, 1 1/4 inch, 1 3/8, just by letting everything kind of settle. So I don't know what a 1/2 inch is going to turn into, so we'll find out here real quick. And again, I should roll the car out and roll it back in and see where we end up. All right, we bounced on the car a couple of times, kind of make sure everything's seated. So again, we 1/2 inch on the threads, gave us about a 1/2 inch in increased height. And I don't know if it is a direct one-to-one relationship. So I'm gonna do another 1/2 inch on this side, and then I'm gonna do the other side real quick. Okay, one final measure. Let's see here, we're right about 24.5, which is about where we started on this car. And on the driver's side, yeah, same thing, 24.5. So if you recall in the beginning of the video, the driver's side was like, what, 1/8 of an inch lower than the passenger side. And what I love about these coilovers is I can dial that out. I don't know if my car's tweaked, maybe I cut the springs wrong on the lowering springs that I had before. Doesn't matter, now I can dial it in perfect. And speaking of that, I can also dial in the compression and rebound. I've got them set to 8 on both the compression and rebound. And like I was showing you on that chart, it's a good place to start. And then from there I can go up or down instead of starting at 0 and then working my way all the way through it and realizing that I need to be at least this high, so that's good. So what did I learn from these things? Remember like those brackets, those shock caps, again, it depends on your export brace. The way mine is shaped and those brackets are so beefy, I had to grind that one edge. You guys may not have to do that on yours. If you had longer carriage bolts, you wouldn't need to do that. But I was just using what I had. I would like to replace those, and I'll have to get that down the road. So I like that. Those spanner wrench tools. So having these kind where you use a like a 3/8 driver wrench to set these up, it does allow you to get into some corners depending on what your suspension is. But I think if I just had the regular ones with the straight bar, that might have been a little easier, just because this thing moves around, and then this thing, trying to get this in the right spot, I had to fiddle with a little bit. It's partly my inexperience, but maybe the ones with the longer handles might have been a better fit for what I'm doing, but for you guys, you'd probably be just fine. And then, again, everything's made in the USA, so I like that. And the customer service, that's another reason why I was telling in the beginning why I went with QA1. When I called them and talked to them, explained to them what I wanted, they said, this is what we have, this would be a perfect fit for what you're doing. We'll start with the 350-pound springs, and if you find they're not enough, we can go up to the 400 or even 450, and I do like that option, that versatility that I can add for my car and kind of dial this in as I figure stuff out. So other than that, guys, super easy install, minimal tools to get that in. And I mean, just looking at it right here, I think these things look fantastic. They're all shiny and new, and they look like somebody put a little effort into it, which is what I like too. So I'm anxious to get out on the road and get some miles on this car and see how it comes out. So, all right, guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. And if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out. And we'll see you in the next one.